What's going on, everybody? We are back with the Club and Sub Podcast, episode number 21. Tonight, we're going to touch UFC 253, Costa versus Adesanya. As usual, I'm your host, John Stargarian, MMA. You can find me on Twitter at MMA Fox. As usual, I'm wearing the Square hat from squaresandsharps.com. They sell a bunch of great merch over there. Go over there, buy something. 1% of their profits go to charity. It's a great brand, squaresandsharps.com. With me today, we got Luke at SWR_betting. C will be joining us shortly, so I will plug him in as soon as he does. Until then, we're just going to recap last weekend, and then if C's not here yet, we'll jump in. Lags and Quinn have a rest day today, so we go on. Anyway, jumping into the disaster that was last week. First two plays I had were on I'll just start with what I have on Better MMA. Random Marcos by decision. Random Marcos 1 unit plus 162. For the 40 seconds it stayed on the feet. It didn't look too bad. Mackenzie tripped, and then she followed her into guard, and I immediately screamed and knew it was over, and sure enough, that's how it played out. Yeah, not a whole lot to add there. Next play I had 1 unit on Andre Ewell, and truthfully, I should have got bigger than this. Although, as it turned out, Ewell's gas tank kind of didn't look great. He won pretty cleanly, but yeah, I had him capped pretty high, and I probably should have gone larger. Bit of a regret. Next up, I had 2 units on Journey Newson, minus 140, and I mean, that sucked. I mean, what else can you really say? I mean, head kick in the first round, pretty random. I don't really, we always knew, a Costa first round KO is live, but I don't know if anybody predicted that. Just one of those things. And then next up, Jordan Espinosa. And boy, was I wrong here. I really thought Espinosa was going to be able to just, outpoint Dvorak on the outside, and he just did an unbelievable job utilizing those leg kicks, just keep him, kind of in that in-between range where you could pick him apart. So that was just a horrible bet, and it was a great fight by Dvorak. And then my last bet was Gerald Meerschaert, who I had a plus 360, and that was also a fucking horrible bet. Again, I got into an argument in our group chat, but, for a one-punch KO is a pretty random outcome. I don't really care what anybody else has to say about it. That's just a fact. But nonetheless, Meerschaert looks like he might be shot. And, yeah, so the Cam's that hype train keeps rolling. So, Luke, how was your week?
Definitely not as good as it probably should have been. So first bet, I had 1.5 units on David Dvorak at minus 111. I will say in full transparency, I didn't think necessarily the leg kicks were going to be the necessarily deciding factor in this fight. But at the end of the day, I did also think he did a really good job of keeping Espinosa in front of him. Once again, that was also largely attributed to the leg kicks. So I will concede that. So cashed a bet there, but Reed, once again, generally wasn't the greatest just because of the leg kick consideration. But even if the leg kicks weren't there, I still am not convinced that Espinosa would have been able to sit on his bike for 15 minutes. So I'm still happy to cash that one. 1 unit, Random Marcos at plus 145. You kind of touched on it. I regret this bet 100% just because I knew going into this that I was betting on a fighter with questionable fight IQ. And when you bet on fighters with questionable fight IQ, they do questionable things. And what did she do? She did essentially the same thing Hannah Cyphers did and engaged Dern on the ground, which in turn, she said all week, I'm not going to do. And she decided to do anyway. Once again, if this fight was standing largely for 15 minutes, I still don't hate my bet, but I do hate my bet because I bet on a fighter with poor fight IQ, so I definitely deserve to take a loss there. Next bet, 1.5 units on Silva Barella at under 2.5 rounds at plus 100. I thought this was a steal. The line didn't make any sense to me. Probably should have went heavier. If you go back to the pod last week, I said that I thought the Silva KO prop was relatively live, but I did also say that, Barella, there's that body lock takedown. What did you do? The body lock takedown. WMMA guard sub, and we saw it to a T there too. So that was kind of my secondary consideration for this bet too, and it ended up working out. So happy to cash that one. And then I had 1.5 units on Chimaev and GM3 under 1.5 minus 120.
How about under 10 seconds? What did that
yeah.
That's
No, definitely. I'm not going to sit here and sound like some genius because that's not necessarily how I thought the fight was going to be playing out from at least like a primary consideration. I thought Chimaev was going to be able to land takedowns and probably pound him out on the feet. But I also did say on the pod last week as well that a Chimaev KO on the feet was relatively live, as I thought Gerald Mearshardt's defensive striking is still not very good. And Chimaev does have some heat on the feet. So I did think that was also a possibility from a secondary consideration for my under 1.5, which cashed, thankfully. Now we get into the shitty part of the night. So I'm on 3-1 on bets, on pace for one hell of a night. Nice little rebound from a couple tough weeks. I had a hedge on Covington by decision for 2.11 units at -130 and Woodley by KO or TKO plus 500 for 0.62 units. Don't really regret it, to be honest, because it's one of those situations where I just chalk it up to MMA variance. Colby Covington was on his way to winning a decision, which is largely what I thought was going to happen. But I did want to give myself another out in case Tyron Woodley pulled his head out of his ass and did something moderately different. But dude broke his rib. It is what it is. Honestly, I don't really regret it. So I ended up ending the night with 0.47 units of profit. If unfortunately that broken rib didn't happen with like a minute left in the fight, we would have had like a 4-unit profit night. But it's the game we play.
Yeah, it was another pretty fucking awful week for me. It's funny, we were cooking all summer, and now I knew at some point things will go cold, but I went into last week pretty confident, and it came out just worst week I've had in like, I don't know, it must be like 3 months. Gotta have to be something like that. But yeah, again, C's going to be joining us at some point. I think it's C, so who knows? He could be in the backwoods of Chicago, lost somewhere. So when he's doing, I'll load him on. But until then, I guess let's jump into this card. Obviously, the main card looks great. I don't think it's the best fight for betting per se. But first fight of the night should be interesting. Luke, you want to get started? Ibragimov, Danilo Marquez. What do you got?
Yeah, so this was a fight I guess I wasn't originally looking to play until I taped Marquez. And I think what the mistake people are making here is that they're seeing this 0-3 on Cadiz or whatever. He hasn't looked particularly great in any of his UFC fights. Obviously, has had some success in the first round early in some of those fights. But it's really about establishing also win conditions for the opponent. And when I looked into this Marquez guy, I just really don't see what he brings to the table. Obviously, he's a jiu-jitsu based guy, but one, he does not close distance effectively at all. His takedown, his takedown offense is not solid at all. Largely, the guys he's taking down are guys he is taking down are via inside-outside trips, but those are also guys who clearly do not have any sort of concept of defensive wrestling. And when on the ground, being a guy who's primarily jiu-jitsu based, he's not overtly just running through these guys on the ground either. So when he's fighting a guy in Ibragimov, who is a combat sambo world champion, who's only been taken down a handful of times, never controlled extensively, has shown good hips, I really struggled to see the win condition of Marquez. So my big thing in making this bet, not something, once again, I was anticipating making a play on, but because if Marquez can't get to this fight to the ground, I don't see how he wins unless he just cage pushes him for like 12 minutes, which I see it relatively unlikely, given Ibragimov's like combat sambo background. And you got to keep in mind too, in the fights in M1, he's fighting guys who are competent also in the wrestling, where this guy really doesn't have much. So I don't see him being stuck there. If Ibragimov does come out super hot and heavy like he has before, honestly, I'm fine with that in this particular matchup because I think he's going to knock this guy out relatively fast. But if he doesn't, and we see a more patient Ibragimov like we saw against Dolidze, I think that also works in his favor because he's going to be able to find the shot at some point. And Marquez really has nothing for him on the feet. So I did play Ibragimov for 1.5 units as Ibragimov hit -150 today. I don't understand this line movement. It doesn't make any sense. If Ibragimov has a lobotomy, gets taken down or something we haven't seen before, and I lose this bet, I guess I'm fine with it, but I just don't see what the path to victory for Marquez is here.
See, how about you?
Yeah, I played Ibragimov for 3.5 units, and I played round 1 knockout for about half a unit. Yeah, similar thoughts. I don't think he could get it to the mat. I kind of think, yeah, it's either cage push or standing back take, which neither I don't really think are, high percentage. Honestly, I capped him at about minus 300 here. But takes better be good. It's 3 a.m. here in South Sudan. Well, I'm sure Espino can fucking come help you battle them. But yeah, I'm on Ibragimov here. Yeah, I mean, there's definitely a case, where he's gassed, but I don't think necessarily like Marquez has some type of good gas tank. I honestly think they're equal in terms of like, who's going to gas out. But my thing is, if he comes out here round one hot, swinging like he has in the past, I think he's just going to get a knockout. I mean, Marquez hasn't fought in like 2 years, so it's kind of mind-boggling that this guy's even getting a fucking opportunity in the UFC.
Yeah, I agree with both of you completely. I haven't played it yet. I'm going to, and probably pretty big. I mean, you guys kind of both hit the nail on the head with it. The only other thing I'll touch on here is like, yeah, kind of what Steve said. If Ibragimov comes out hot, he's going to probably finish. And the other thing is all Marquez is going to do, he has no striking. All he's going to do is look to grapple, and Ibragimov's a much better grappler. And I kind of think if he tries to force the grappling, it'll probably preserve his gas tank some because he won't be going off. And it's most likely going to end up with Marquez on his mat getting his face beaten in on the ground with Cadiz on top of him. Yeah, I think Ibragimov's got him covered everywhere. I haven't played it yet, but I'm going to. I think Marquez is one of the worst men's signings we've ever had, to be honest. So, yeah, maybe we'll all be wrong, but I don't think so. I don't really understand the people who have been pushing this Marquez line down all week. It's like nobody actually bothered to watch, I don't know, any of the 4 fights that are available. Obviously, there's a 2-year hiatus, and I've seen some narrative that maybe Marquez could have improved. Sure, but he's 34 and not very athletic. So, I mean, I don't really know how much you can count on that. But anyway, we move on. We got Jeff Hughes, Juan Espino. Luke, I know you have another player here. What do you got?
Yeah, so once again, similar to the first fight, not a fight I was originally looking to play. But then thank you, Bet Online, for starting to drop some props now with the little 5D exit now. Yeah, they put the fight doesn't go to decision at minus 160, which I thought was pretty insane here. So I put 3 units on that. I'm not particularly high on either guy, but I think if we're talking from a stylistic perspective, Juan Espino is an absolutely terrible stylistic matchup for Jeff Hughes. Not in the sense that Jeff Hughes has just came out here and just gotten dominated on the ground overtly over the course of his career, but a couple fights I will touch on. One in the Todd Duffy fight. Todd Duffy landed a takedown on him relatively easily, and Todd Duffy has never taken anybody down in his UFC career over 7 fights. Secondly, even in some of his regional fights back in LFA, where he was actually able to get guys down and get some top position, he was swept relatively easily, and guys were able to work into mount, pass his guard with absolute ease. He had absolutely no answer for that. And in Espino, once again, not a guy I'm overtly high on, but he does come from a really credentialed wrestling and grappling background. He's a black belt. Dude's been fighting over in like Africa and these Senegalese wrestling and all these like funky, like weird rule type, like the dude's been doing the grappling and wrestling game for a long time prior to even starting MMA. Like the dude knows what he's doing. And from the MMA fights we've seen, he's going to come forward. He's going to shoot takedowns. He does do a good job of passing and getting into dominant positions on guys. So even though my one consideration here is Jeff Hughes is just like a really tough guy. And that's why I was like, maybe not. Maybe Jeff can survive, but against a guy like this, who I also think, even though Jeff Hughes is super experienced, dude has like almost 30 fights in general between his amateur and pro career. This is easily the best wrestler and grappler he's ever fought. I just really struggle to see how Jeff Hughes keeps this fight upright for any extended period of time. And with that, I think Espino's going to be able to take him down, get into dominant positions, whether he submits him. Probably, but I think it's also a possibility that he just pounds him out. I don't see Jeff Hughes surviving here.
See, how about you?
He's gone.
He's gone. Okay. So see, we'll be back. Yeah, I don't totally. Oh, nope, he's back now. Here we go. See, Espino, Hughes, what do you got?
Yeah, I played a little Espino round one sub at plus 340, or maybe it was plus 350 or something along those lines. But yeah, I mean, I do kind of, tend to be a little bit weary off, someone who's 39 coming off 2 hand surgeries. He hasn't fought in 2 years. It's definitely a spot where, like, after the first round, I kind of do think it could get a little bit dicey. It's probably a better spot, honestly, to kind of live bet. Like, if Espino is not having, any success in the first, like, 2.5 minutes, getting a takedown, I kind of favor Hughes the longer the fight goes. I think the line's a little bit wide. I just, the prop I'm kind of just basing more on, if Espino looks minus 300, it's probably him getting the grappling going early. And if the grappling's going early, I do think he'll have an opportunity to get a submission. But, it definitely is one of those spots where, the guy's at an age where he could just be completely no chin, nothing, and has no durability. So it's really kind of, you're taking somewhat of a crapshoot here. I'm not really a fan of people who aren't that active, especially at that age. You really don't know what you're getting. So I would just kind of be wary on laying any type of juice on him. I wouldn't even parlay him. I would just look to kind of bet these win conditions more so than anything straight or tied to an over-under.
Yeah, I don't totally disagree with any of that. To be honest, my issue here, just in general, like, I sort of had some interest in playing Hughes. I don't know where either of these guys are at. Like, Hughes is wrestling. There's just not really enough footage. Seems decent enough, but, like, I kind of think the range of outcomes here, like, Espino could be minus 500 in terms of true value, and I'd have no way of knowing because there's just not enough data. And conversely, there's a scenario where Espino is totally washed at 39, coming off an injury and a 2-year layoff, and Hughes should be like minus 250. So, like, I think there's a pretty good case to play Hughes. I don't think I'm gonna, but yeah, I kind of agree with both of you. Inside the distance is probably a good way to play it. And to Steve's point, if Espino gets him down early, he probably puts him away. But yeah, I don't have a strong view on it. I guess more than anything else, I'm kind of looking forward to see if, maybe Espino can win some fights in the UFC. I don't know. But yeah, we'll move on. We got William Knight, Alexa Kamar. What do you got here, Luke?
So once again, not a fight I was originally looking to play, but the line dropped down into playable range for me. I got 2 units on Kamar at minus 158. Ultimately, I just don't really see any merit in this Knight guy outside of the fact that he's this big jack dude. Has a ton of finishes, but from a stylistic perspective, I don't really see what he brings to the table. His offensive wrestling is not good. His defensive wrestling is not good. He's not high output. He doesn't really utilize any sort of footwork. He doesn't utilize any sort of head movement. And bringing it to Kamar, a guy who's at least going to come forward and throw some heavy shots too. I think a knockout from Kamar is definitely live, but I think it's also really encouraging that we did see him go win a fight over the course of 3 rounds, especially over a guy in Justin Ledet, who's known to be at least a high output boxer, and he almost doubled him up on strikes. Not saying it was this overtly great performance from Kamar. He definitely slowed down. There is some argument that Ledet maybe won that fight, but I do think it is encouraging to see that Kamar at least won a fight on the cards once again against a guy who's largely high output, and he was able to shut him down to like 48 significant strikes. So once it's one of these fights, once again, I don't really see the win condition of Knight. Like maybe he knocks him out, and maybe he proves to be one of these guys who's just anomalous in the sense that his power outdoes any sort of technical acumen at all, like a Derek Lewis, and I completely look like an idiot. But through watching tape, there's just nothing really I think that this guy brings to the table outside of physique and power. I think Kamar's faster. I think he's a bit more technical. He's proven he can go 3 rounds. So it's one of these fights I'm kind of just willing to lose to get kind of questions answered on Knight, because I don't really understand the line. I don't understand the hype. Obviously, the UFC's behind him. He came off that Contender Series fight, and they gave him like a developmental contract. So we'll see. But I'm going with Kamar here.
I see. How about you?
Yeah, I don't really have too strong of opinions. I've been going back and forth and just playing the over 1.5. I think they're both, pretty raw. Amor is probably a little bit more fundamentally sound, but, I think they're both pretty green, but at least Amor has age on his side where he could be, making improvements. He hasn't fought in like 9 months or a year or whatever the hell it is. He's at an age where he could be improving, and kind of with Knight, I just kind of think he's somewhat meme. He's losing until he's winning. And I don't know what to really make of it. Gonna probably pass, but I have a feeling there's some value on the over 1.5. But I'm just kind of sitting this one out.
Yeah, I'm similar. I don't have a ton of interest in the fight. I bet Liddell against Kamar, and that was remarkably frustrating, to be honest, because it just felt like if Liddell had just kind of, at any point in that fight, in any of the 3 rounds, turned up the volume a bit, he would have won that fight, but he didn't. So I don't really rate Kamar much, but conversely, I don't rate Knight much. To your point, Luke, he is. His contenders fight was some Johnny Walker shit that he just won. Was he in full back mount and the guy just freaked out? The ref was going to stand him up and rolled off him. It was remarkable. I don't know if Kamar has any wrestling. That's a kind of a big part of the analysis too, because if he does, he can probably put Knight down right away and finish him. And on the feet, I don't think Knight can win minutes, but his power is dangerous enough and Kamar is hittable enough that it's enough to scare me away from kind of a play at favorite money. So my pick's going to be Kamar, but not a ton of interest for me here. We move on. Shane Young against Ludovic Klein. I'll start with you.
Yeah, I think the line's probably close to where it should be. I don't really think Young's – I'm not really impressed by Young just in general. I do think he throws good output, but, he kind of has a zombie, approach. Like, if you look at that Arnett fight, he's basically just eating shots to close distance, which isn't really anything, that you want, especially for someone like Klein, who I think's more fundamentally sound. In my opinion, it's more that Austin was kind of landing some shots when he switched to southpaw, and I think the counter cross is going to be there for Klein, and he does have some pretty big explosive moments. I just tend to I favor Klein slightly, probably 55-45, but I understand playing Young just by the nature of volume. But I don't really think that there's a big step up from what Klein's facing to Young. I really don't think Young's, he's in the UFC, but honestly, I don't think he's anything special in terms of a striker. I don't mind any, Klein round 1 props and then Young round 3. Those are probably fine. Or, fight doesn't go to decision. I think the line is probably almost accurate. No problem taking a shot on Young just based on volume, but I lean Klein just fundamentally, and I just think that cross counter is going to be there.
Yeah, I have some interest in Young right now. I'm probably going to wait and see if his cross is evens. I kind of agree with most of what you said, to be honest. My one kind of counter to it would just be Klein hasn't really faced this kind of insane volume of pressure yet, and so there's a couple of unanswered questions. In particular, if he doesn't land the big shot, will he up his volume to a degree where he can win minutes here? Second, I've seen him slow down, and I think the only fight he's been in went to a decision, and so things could get pretty dicey late. And then just in general, how's he going to react to adversity? We know Young's willing to come forward and get punched in the face repeatedly to get in his range. And so, I don't really know. I don't rate the Czech regional scene much. I do agree. I think Klein's an intriguing prospect. He's definitely the technically sharper fighter, but I personally think of this kind of thing with a debutant coming in with so many unanswered questions, facing a pretty low level of competition. It's hard for me to line him back 40%. I still haven't jumped in on Young again. I probably won't unless it gets to even. But I'm thinking about it. I think there's some value on him right now. Luke, how about you?
Yeah, so I'm a little bit more with C here on this. I don't have a play. I think the line is roughly correct. I did give Shane Young a slight edge just based on volume. Once again, I'm trying to factor in optics a little bit more, that even if Klein's counter game is on point, well, if you kind of got that zombie game that C talked about, going for it, even though you're eating shots, but you're going for it, also landing shots, that it might optically look better in the eyes of the judges. But from a technical perspective, to C's point, I do think Klein actually is the better fighter here. My big thing is that Klein, at least in terms of what I noticed in tape, is that he just manages distance really, really well. And so against a guy in Young, who is going to be kind of that prodding zombie-like guy, I do think Klein just kind of outpoints him from the outside. Once again, how the judges score that, how that optically looks, I don't know. So it's one of the reasons the fights, it's the first fight in my 3 not for me this week. It's just one I don't really want any part of. But if you did get in on Klein at like around that 40% indication, that plus 150, plus 140, I think that was the bet. But at current price, I think you're kind of making a little bit of a leap of faith on either guy. But it's also one of those fights where I think you can make a solid case for either guy winning, which is ultimately why I really want to stay away. Don't have a strong read, but I do think Klein beats him.
I mean, it's kind of crazy that Young was like minus 200 against Landwehr when that fight got pulled, and now he's sitting at evens here. Like, I'm not saying like.
I know a lot of people bet. I know a lot of sharp people bet Landwehr there.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like, I'm not saying Landwehr is any better than Klein. It's just kind of odd because it seems like Landwehr is at least a bit more proven, that the public would be juicing Young there, but not here. Like there. So anyway,
Nate,
yeah.
I don't know. I think Nate's pretty bad, but
yeah. So we move on. We got Diego Nightmare Sanchez going off as a plus 525 underdog against Australian-born Jake Matthews. Luke, what do you got?
Once again, not a fight I was originally looking to target, but we're betting numbers here, guys. And I saw FanDuel put Jake Matthews by decision at plus 120, so I played that for 1.5 units. I think this line's crazy to me. It's in recent weeks, there's been a lot of these decision lines where there's been like a massive discrepancy in terms of the money line and then the decision line. And then I watch tape and I'm like, this really makes no sense to me at all. So largely my reasoning is one, Jake Matthews is not a historic finisher by any means. And I think the mistake people are making, or at least more so in terms of the odds makers here, is that, all right, well, this guy's, over almost 90% chance to win this fight or whatever. Therefore, he's now just going to run through Diego Sanchez and finish him. But last time I checked, Diego Sanchez fought Michel Pereira, a guy who's one I'm not particularly high on, but a guy who's got explosive nature, a lot of power, that a lot of people thought that Pereira was just going to absolutely run through Diego Sanchez. Didn't happen. Fought Michael Chiesa, a guy who's accomplished in terms of his grappling, who had a ton of wrestling success in that fight, got into a lot of dominant positions in that fight. Granted, 30-26 him, didn't finish Diego Sanchez. So my big thing is like plus 120 on Jake Matthews is a bit crazy to me, because on the feet, I think he can outwork him if he decides to take it to the ground. I think he can also win there. Once again, I don't think he's going to submit Diego Sanchez. Once again, I don't think he's going to knock out Diego Sanchez. Jake Matthews is another one of these guys who I think just gets a little bit more flack than he deserves. He's a guy who came into the UFC at 19 years old. He's one of these guys who's kind of grown up and developed within the UFC. So has there been mental lapses from Jake Matthews? Yes. So is kind of the narrative here that, maybe that mental lapse comes from Jake Matthews and Diego Sanchez is able to capitalize on it. But how high do you rate that? To me, very, very low. From a skill set standpoint, where both guys are at, this is Jake Matthews all day, but plus 120, once again, at 45% indication, just does not make any sort of sense to me at all. I think Jake Matthews wins a pretty unanimous decision.
See, Jake Matthews, the nightmare. What do you got?
Yeah, I don't have a lot of interest on this. I did play Matthews round 1 knockout when it came out at like plus 500 or something. I do think Matthews, can hit hard early. He's shown it. Worth a stab. No interest in laying minus 800 on Jake Matthews versus anyone probably ever. So yeah, choose a prop. Whatever prop you want to try, go for it. That's how I would play this fight. But yeah, if you're one of those dumbasses who's parlaying minus 900s, I hope you kind of lose.
I'm with you. Yeah, I'll say this. The line is wide. I'll also say this. I'm not betting Diego Sanchez. I just, like C said, I don't think Jake Matthews should be minus 500 against anybody with a pulse, pretty much. The guy is just a – I mean, we've seen it so many times. Even, like, what was it, Emil Weber-Mack who he fought last fight? And you just saw him almost give the fight away at the end. Look, Diego, especially Josh Fabia Diego, is a maniac who is terrible. But you never know. Maybe he makes some work and does something. I don't know. I don't have much interest in this fight. I kind of like Luke's way of playing the decision just because I think Matthews' finishing potential is a bit overrated. Like, I don't think he has a single standing KO in the UFC. But and he's not subbing Diego, I don't think. Like, Chiesa couldn't sub Diego with like 13 minutes of top time. Matthews isn't. So, yeah, I don't hate Matthews by decision, but yeah, it's not a play for me. It's a bit embarrassing this fight's on this card, to be honest. We move on. We got Brad Riddell, Alex De Silva. Again, I think the line's a little wide. I don't have any real interest in playing De Silva, though. It's not wide enough. The real problem is I thought Riddell's last fight against Mustafayev on a lot of levels was pretty concerning. Mustafayev basically was able to hold him on the fence, take him down over and over, and he gave up his back basically every time he got taken down to get up. And De Silva will put hooks in and occasionally go for a body triangle. So you'd think, naturally, why not play it to plus 280? The thing is, I just don't think De Silva is, number one, not smart a fighter, number two, like that good a wrestler. Like most of the tape I've seen outside of his fight with Kazula, who just kind of kept falling into takedowns, he just doesn't really attempt takedowns in volume. Like if you told me De Silva was going to come out and attempt like 6 to 8 takedowns here, I'd probably play him at these odds, but I don't think that's going to happen. I think he's probably going to trade with him. And I think Riddell probably cuts him the ribbons at range. But even with that said, Riddell's willingness to just kind of exchange power shots in the pocket also kind of scares me because it does seem like De Silva can hit a bit. And so I wouldn't rule out a flash KO. But, yeah, I think Riddell should be a pretty significant favorite. But, again, I think the line's probably a little wide. Luke, how about you?
Yeah, I don't have much to add there. I think you hit the nail on the head. My big thing with De Silva is the guy's just kind of a really big question mark for me. Like there's a decent amount of tape out there on him, but it's one of those really weird situations where there just hasn't been much that I've been able to take from De Silva really at all. I think he's decently well-rounded, but at the same time, I don't think he overtly excels in any stretch of the imagination. In Riddell, as you touched on, he's a guy who's obviously going to be the more accomplished striker here, but he got tagged pretty bad by Jimmy Malarkey, who in my opinion is not a UFC caliber fighter either. So if he fights smart, but once again, it's kind of the theme of this card. We got a bunch of city kickboxing guys. We got the Shane Youngs, we got the Kai Kara Francis. They're guys who sit there and they take shots. They will take shots. Largely they're winning, yes, but they will also accept the back foot at times and take shots. So if De Silva comes forward, maybe there's a knockout there. Once again, maybe if he goes grapple heavy, as you touched on, in that Mustafayev fight, Riddell got stuck on the cage way too much, gave his back to get up. I don't know De Silva's grappling credentials necessarily, but I believe he's a black belt. It's kind of interesting. I do think from a straight perspective, the value's on De Silva. But once again, to me, the guy is just a massive question mark. I have no idea how he's going to approach this fight. Riddell could spark him. De Silva could look like minus 300. I just have no idea. This fight's a massive pass for me.
C, can you hear me? All right. C will be back. So, here he is. C, nope. Okay. C, there you are. De Silva Riddell, what do you got?
Yeah, I thought I was gonna play. Not that I was gonna play. I just thought I'd, when I was watching tape, I was thinking, Riddell should probably be a good size favorite pre-tape, and then I watched that. What's the Russian dude's last name? Mustafayev. Yeah, and I bet on Mustafayev the first time. So in my head, Magic messaged me. He's like, "Did you didn't you remember Riddell like beating his ass? And I was like, yeah, pretty much. And then when I watched, I was like, fuck, this was way closer than I originally like had thought in my mind. Probably just because I lost the bet. But yeah, I think, to your point, there are some concerning moments in that fight that Silva could possibly take advantage of. So I'm staying away. I don't really have like too strong of an opinion. Like Silva could be a sleeper. I don't know. There's, the line's probably okay. I have no interest in laying that type of juice here or really making any type of stabs on that fight.
Yeah, agreed. And we'll stick with you here. Zubair Takuga, Hakeem Dawadu. What do you got?
Yeah, I played the Russian. I just think he has a more reliable win path. He hits harder. He has the grappling upside. Dawadu starts pretty slow. So, right off the bat, I kind of think, round one's probably like 65-35. So I just, I played 1.5 units on him. I also have some round one knockout stabs. I just think that there's good amount of value up until about like minus 186. So I'm on him for 1.5 units.
Yeah, I don't hate it. Again, it's another one that I haven't played, and I haven't decided if I'm going to play. I'm contemplating a play on Zuba as well. Like, pretty much, like, obviously at range, and on minutes, like, Dawodo's just going to outvolume him. But, like, Takuga, first of all, his wrestling's a little underrated. Like, he doesn't have the control and advanced game that, like, a Makhachev or a Khabib has, but his entries are pretty legit. Like, his ability to get takedowns is very, very good. It's just he doesn't do much with them. And I can see that on the feet. He's got real power. And Dawadu, I have some serious questions about his shin, to be honest. Like, he's taking shots kind of badly against both.
I'll be back.
I would say, all right, and the guy he fought in Canada last year. I don't remember exactly who that was.
The Chinese guy hit him with a. I don't remember his name, but that Chinese guy smoked him with some shots.
And I've seen him get dropped regionally too. And so it's like Zuba does hit hard. Like, I could definitely see Zuba knocking him out. And when he has the upside of 3 to 5 takedowns, that makes winning rounds an uphill battle. The problem is, like we saw it in the Lerone Murphy fight, Zuba, when he wrestles heavy, will gas. And if this turns into a point where he can no longer get him down or hold him down, unlike the Murphy fight, I think Dawadu probably will bite down, in the later rounds and go forward. And so it's like I favor Zuba kind of in that 60 to 65% range, but it's not the most confident cap ever. Frankly, with the way MMA Twitter's talked up Dawadu, I really expected this line to move the other way, not to keep moving towards Takuga. So it's no play at the moment, but Takuga's my lead. Luke, how about you?
So second fight in my 3-0 for me. I want absolutely zero part of this fight. It's one of these fights where it's ultimately who's able to get off on their game. Obviously, there's been some wrestling questions in terms of Dawadu. Bochniak was able to get on his hips multiple times, not able to get any sort of extensive control time on him necessarily, but was able to get in on him. And with Takuga, he's easily the best wrestler he's ever fought, who's obviously shown good control components, but as you touched on, John, doesn't do a whole lot with them. So I think it's very, very interesting that a guy in Takuga goes to split decision with Felipe Nover and then goes to split decision with Hanato Moicano. I think that speaks volumes to about the game of Takuga in terms of how he fights. He's one of these guys, he's either all the way out or he's all the way in. He's got that big overhand right or he's wrestling. But he's not an overtly high volume guy. And because of his style, he's found himself in a lot of these close fights. So my big question coming in here is, now Dawadu hasn't faced the caliber wrestler of Takuga, but if he is able to at least stuff takedowns in some sort of amount of volume and not get overtly controlled here, I do think Dawadu also probably wins this fight on the feet. Yeah. But to me, it's one of these fights where it's just, it could be close to, and at least to speak to the credence of Takuga, is that one thing I noticed through tape is that Dawadu has consistently gotten hit with the right hands from all 5 guys he's fought. Yep. They have landed that right hand consistently. Now, Takuga isn't necessarily like this, straight right type of guy, but he just chucks that thing from his hip. and when it comes, it comes. And if you don't see it, you're getting knocked the fuck out. So if Dawadu isn't ready for it, it is what it is. And that's honestly what we saw from Henry in his very first fight. It was the right hand that dropped him, not necessarily in the same sense how Takuga is going to throw it. But ultimately, there's just a lot of question marks in this fight for me, because I think if Dawadu is able to stuff takedowns, I think he wins this fight on volume. But once again, best wrestler he's ever fought against a guy who laces legs well, utilizes far side wrist control well. It's one of those fights where I think either guy could look like minus 300 or it could be a split. It's one of those really funky fights that I think people kind of want to plant their flag on. And I want no part of it.
Yeah, I bet Murphy against Takuga, and that was one of the most remarkably frustrating fights to watch ever. I can remember. But yeah, we'll move on. We go to I got to play here. We got Ketlin Vieira, Sijara Eubanks, and I got it on Eubanks for 2 units at plus 170, and pretty much I think she should be a favorite here, to be honest. I see, and everybody this week is picking Ketlin, and it's like we just ignore the fact that she doesn't outland anybody at range. Her head doesn't move at all. Like, she's remarkably hittable. She just got knocked like flat out unconscious, and like I get Aldana hits hard, but like she's not Amanda Nunes. Like, she just overextends on everything, and like while she's got her takedown defense stats are good, if you actually go into it a little closer, I'm not sure. Not that her takedown defense isn't good. I'm not sure it's as elite as the stats would suggest. Like, if you watch that McMahon fight, McMahon pretty much gasses in the second round. Like, that's basically what happened. It gets finished on the mat. She gets her down fairly easily in the first round and holds her there. And so, like, I look at this fight and I'm like, look, I know Sijara Eubanks isn't the wrestler that Sarah McMahon is, but she is powerful, and she will just kind of lift and slam people, like, kind of that single leg lift. And like, I think she could probably get that here. And I think if she gets on top at any point, she holds her down for the rest of that round. On the feet, I give Sijara kind of, maybe it's close because Vieira's longer and she's a bit bigger, but she is much more hittable. And I think Sijara is going to have plenty of, it'll be close to even at distance, but I slightly favor Eubanks. And I think she's got a chance to hurt her. Now the counter to that, and why I'm not playing her bigger than 2 units, is I do think if at any point Vieira gets on top of her, she probably holds her down too, because Eubanks also seems to have, some issues on her back. But I just don't, I don't understand like why Vieira is a favorite, to be honest. I just don't see anywhere where she has an edge that she can, easily exploit. So yeah, I have 2 units on Eubanks at plus 170. Luke, how about you?
So I'm right there with you. Slightly different bet. I moved in on it today. I got 1 unit on Eubanks by decision at plus 250. I guess I don't really have too much to add on to that. You hit pretty much everything. I actually do like Ketlin Vieira, but as you noted, in 4 of her 5 UFC fights, she's actually been outlanded at range. And one kind of misconception I want to, sure up is that Sijara Eubanks' boxing is bad, and it's not. Her boxing is actually pretty solid. The reason why she's gotten beaten a couple of these fights in the latter rounds by, your best Reyes, it's because she gets tired, slows down, the movement slows down, and then she starts getting hit. Not a direct comparison, but very similar to a Viviane Araújo that I've talked about before, where her boxing is very good, but once she gets tired, that shit goes out the window, and then she's a stationary target to get hit. So it's not that her boxing is that bad. It's that there's just been some cardio concerns. And one thing I will say is if you actually look at her last 2 fights against Moraes and then against Avila, I think her cardio over 15 minutes looked fine. So I think go for it.
Even the Ladd fight, she only had like 50 strikes in round 3 against Ladd.
Yeah, in my opinion, I think that fight should have been a draw. I got my Eddie Bravo hat on. I think there was a possibility that fight was a draw. But nonetheless, my big thing here is in betting this fight, like maybe she does knock Vieira out. But ultimately, it's one of those cases where I think Sijara is just a tough girl. And, the knockout by Aldana, I think, might be a bit of an anomaly. Obviously, there is Vieira defensive questions in terms of her striking. But also, Eubanks isn't a girl who's knocking girls out historically. So my big thing is for Sijara is, as you touched on, John, her wrestling defense is very solid at 92%. She's fought a lot of wrestling, grappling-based fighters, but I would also rate Sajara's wrestling in top 5 in the UFC, regardless of weight class, personally. And when we actually have seen Vieira taken down, she is not getting up.
No.
So I think that's a very interesting consideration in this fight. So if she wrestles, I think she has a clear path to victory there. If she stands, I don't think she can sit there at range with Vieira for extended minutes, because at the same time, not saying that Vieira is this world-class striker, but we even saw in that Ashley Evans-Smith fight where Ashley Evans-Smith landed a shitload of strikes on Vieira. The judges still gave the nod to Vieira because she was even landing a ton of strikes, even though Ashley Evans-Smith was blocking a lot of punches with her guard. Didn't matter. So my big thing for Eubanks is she has to get inside and fight in those dirty boxing phone booth type exchanges. That's where I think she wins. Once again, I think she also has a path to victory on the ground. I think the decision line has a ton of value.
Yeah, I agree. And honestly, like, Eubanks is an excellent round winner. Like, she really is. Like, I think she's perennially underrated. I think I mentioned it a couple weeks ago. But she outlands everybody. You know, her margins, her metrics are good. And Ketlin's not a great round winner. It's just kind of, you know, the reality here. I mean, maybe we'll be wrong, but I don't think so.
It could be one of those situations, you know, the girl was 9-0 before she takes her first pro loss. She makes a ton of corrections, and we come out here and see an absolute monster Vieira. But at the same time, at plus 250 on a decision line on a girl, as you touched on, who is a round winner, who has a wrestling and grappling component, BJJ black belt, who's a good boxer, who puts out decent volume, I'm willing to pay up to find that out.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I'm pretty much willing to lose a bet against pretty much anybody on Eubanks at plus 170, not named Amanda Nunes in that division. It's like, to be completely honest, like, yeah, it's. Anyway, we move on. I got another play here. Kai Kara France, Brandon Royval. And I laid the juice with Kai Kara France here. 2.5 units, minus 210. I don't like making plays like this, favorites like this, but, you know, I went on a rant about Royval against Elliott. I'm going to do it again right now. Brandon Royval is not good. Like, again, it's another week where I've seen all of these people talking about Brandon Royval, how he's this high-level grappler. No, he's got a sharp guard where he throws up a ton of crazy submission attempts and every now and then catches someone who's pretty low level in them, or Tim Elliott just gasses and quits. Brandon Royval is extremely easy to hold down on the mat. Like, you saw if you watch Casey Kenny fight, he holds him down for 5 rounds, really without any problem at all. Like, if you have any understanding of positional grappling, you hold him down. And grappling's his best path here, except I don't think he can take Kara France down. You know, Kara France has tremendous takedown defense. And even if he got him down, Kara France's get-ups are pretty on point. And I actually think if Kai ends up on top of him at all, he can control him pretty easily. And then on the feet, like, I have some concerns that Royval will just spam volume. Like, he does throw a lot and he comes forward. But he is so hittable. And, like, I think I rate Kara France better than most people, but his striking's pretty sharp. He's got a really nice overhand right. You know, she's just a very well-schooled striker, whereas while Royval will spam volume and come forward, his chin's always out there to be hit. I mean, you even saw it in the brief moments at range in the Elliott fight. Elliott was tagging him clean over and over again. And so I just think he's going to be able to hit him at will. I think it's likely, if it stays on the feet for any length of time, that he's going to hurt Royval at some point, maybe a couple times. I actually don't hate playing for Kara France KO here. So, yeah, maybe I will look like a dunce again. But, yeah, it is, once again, fade Brandon Royval week. 2.5 units, minus 210. What do you got, Luke?
So no bet for me here, but honestly, I cannot add anything to that breakdown because you said legitimately, essentially verbatim, exactly what my breakdown was. So I can't add anything to it. The only reason I guess I would say at any point of contention of why I'm not playing Kai Kara France here is that over the course of his career, he's largely been, I think he's actually been a favorite in every single one of his fights. And he's kind of sitting around that, you know, that 66, 70% line. And there's been just a lot of fights, even though he's 4-1 in the UFC, even though he's won 3 unanimous decisions, there's fights that have just been a little bit more competitive than I think they should have been. Like that De La Rosa fight, like De La Rosa hit him with like 60 significant strikes. I'm like, bro, why are you getting hit by Mark De La Rosa 60 times? So, and there's just a few other instances of that. And Tyson Nam took a round off of him. It's like, to me, he's one of these guys, not a direct comparison, but kind of to a Kevin Holland, where I think the line is where it should be. He should be winning. He's going to win these fights, but I'm just not trying to lay that kind of price on Kai Kara France because I feel like it's going to catch up to him at some point. But in this matchup, I do agree. I do actually think Kai Kara France knocks him out. Royval's striking is just so loose. He leads with a low kick. Everything he throws is really loopy. I know people are going to talk about how Kai Kara France has no knockouts in the UFC. I get it, but actually go back and watch some of those guys. And if you've watched any sort of UFC, all of those guys are extremely durable. None of them have been knocked out overtly extensively or even finished in general. So I think that's an important consideration here. And with that loose nature of Royval striking defense, I think that right hand of Kai Kara France is going to be there all day. And I think Kai Kara France gets his first knockout. But I'm wishing everything the best for you, John, but I'm not trying to lay it on Kai Kara France.
Yeah, I get it. Believe me, I get it. But we move on. Co-main event, great fight for the light heavyweight vacant title, even though we all know it's for the real championship that Dominic Reyes holds, but that's neither here nor there. Just kidding. But yes, Dominic Reyes, Jan Blachowicz. I'm a little pissed at myself, to be honest, about this. Like, this line hung on FanDuel at minus 205 for a while, and I was interested in playing Reyes, and I was like, I don't really want to lay minus 200. I let it sit there, and now it's minus 290. So no play for me. Personally, I think the line's pretty close-ish to being right, to be honest. I don't know. I rate Reyes pretty highly. I think, he's just on the feet. First of all, speed and athleticism gap is massive. I think he has a much better understanding of range than Jan does. I also think Jan's power is a bit overrated here. And so it's like, yeah, I kind of trust, the Reyes' volume more than I trust Jan's ability to win minutes here. Like, to be honest, Blachowicz's best path to victory is probably via grappling. I just don't, Reyes' defensive grappling is very good. I don't think even if he gets taken down, he's getting held down there. So again, it's like, I just struggle to see where Jan can have consistent success. Could he knock him out? Sure. Could he win a greasy decision where Reyes slows down? That's very in play. But, Reyes' gas tank outside of the Vulcan fight where he broke his nose in the first minute has generally looked really good for 3 rounds. And like I said, I just kind of trust him to win minutes. And I think the finishing upside is kind of massively in his favor in this fight. So, I think the line's right. I'm going to predict Reyes by knockout. And, yeah, what do you think, Luke?
Similar to the last fight, man, you echoed every single sentiment that I have here. One thing I will say is that in all the fights that Jan has been in, he's largely been one of these guys who's historically undervalued.
Yeah.
I will, to make a slight comparison, kind of like a Josh Emmett. Like, Josh Emmett, I think, has been an underdog in like 7 of his 8 UFC fights or something like that, and the dude's got a crazy winning record. Similar with Jan, in his last 8, I think he's been an underdog in 7 of those 8 fights. Dude's 7-1. So I do want to put that out there just for a little bit of consideration that he's one of these guys who's historically undervalued. And I think that does have to be taken into consideration. But I also think Dominic Reyes is the best 205-pounder in the world right now. Not named John Jones, who's obviously gone, but I just don't see anybody really doing anything to him. Jan's, I think it'll be one of these kind of fights where it's Jan who can make the fight competitive in a certain sense, but it's going to be one of those fights where it's going to be a competitive fight with a clear round winner. The narrative on that Jan's this big knockout artist, I think, is bullshit. Because if you actually go back and look at over the majority of his UFC career, he's not knocking out anybody. He starched a couple guys with questionable durability. Luke Rockhold, questionable durability. Corey Anderson, questionable durability. So I think that needs to be taken into consideration here. And I think our boy Lags actually does have a play on the over 2.5, which I was really highly considering. And I ended up staying away, but I think that might be a good bet. I think that if there's any bet on this fight, I wouldn't necessarily recommend laying minus 300 on Reyes. I think the line's right about where it should be. Once again, I've lost a lot of money betting against Jan, so maybe I'm a little biased there. But once again, like I said, he's another one of these guys historically undervalued. So, but I think if there is a play for this fight, it's probably the over 2.5.
Yeah, I agree. So we move on. Main event of the evening. One of the best fights of the year. Undefeated champion Israel Adesanya defends his title against undefeated challenger Paulo Costa. Luke, you play here. What do you got?
Yeah, once again, I guess it was a fight I was looking to target, but I didn't think the line was going to get to where I wanted it. Ultimately, I wanted minus 150 on Adesanya, but just kind of judging how things were moving, I thought there was going to be a big Costa surge today, and there wasn't. Maybe it comes tomorrow, and I'm wrong, and I got egg on my face, and I laid too heavy of a line. But I got 2.5 units on Adesanya at minus 162. My big thing here is that Adesanya is clearly proven to be the better fighter, and I'm just not 100% sold on Costa. Literally, the guy's a savage. I don't concede anything about that. But if we're looking at, his fights over the course of the last couple of years, he's fighting Gareth McClellan. He's fighting Ben Bochet, two guys now out of the UFC. He's fighting Uriah Hall, a guy who hurt him really bad, but another guy that we just never know who's showing up. And also, Uriah Hall landed like probably 15 jabs in a row on him with relative ease, and then ultimately just stayed against the cage, let himself get walked down. But the Romero fight, I will give him credit for. It's not easy to sit there and go out and beat a guy like Yoel Romero. But what I will say is around that halfway mark of that second round, we saw Costa start to slow down. And I think Costa just kind of edged that second round. I personally scored it 29-28 Costa, as the judges did, so I don't have an issue with the decision. But then in that third round, Costa did not look good. He did not look good at all. So my big thing here is this is a 25-minute fight against a guy who's now been 25 minutes, going on 3 times now, who's consistently shown solid movement patterns, who's one of the faster guys in MMA, regardless of weight class, against a guy who's largely coming out here and just bum rushing guys and beating them. In saying that, I'm not taking anything away from the striking prowess of Costa because he is technical. It's just the aggression that he has, and with how much success he's been able to have against relatively lower guys. This is easily the hardest fight he's ever had, and I don't see him having that kind of success against Adesanya. Like literally, maybe he comes in here, bum rushes Adesanya in the first 5 minutes, knocks him out, or even maybe within the first 2 rounds, and I got egg on my face. But to me, that's the win condition of Paulo Costa. Like I've heard a lot of people say, oh, well, Costa, it's not out of the question that he can win a decision here. Maybe he can, but based on historics, there is nothing that says to me that he can come out here and win at least 15 minutes. If you go back to that Ben Bochet fight, really suck and win in that second round. Go back to that Hall fight, really suck and win in that second round. Go back to the Romero fight, really suck and win in that second round. The third round, done. He had nothing. Romero picked him apart. Easy win. Add an extra 5-10 minutes on that Romero fight. Costa's done. He's got nothing. So maybe he shows me something in this fight that I have not seen before, and he's able to beat Adesanya over the course of 25 minutes. I'll come back on here and say I was wrong. Maybe he comes out here and knocks him out in the first round. I'll say I was wrong because I acknowledge that was also his win condition here, but there's nothing that says to me that he has the technical striking ability, not to say that he doesn't, but against a guy like Adesanya, whose movement patterns, switches stances, cuts angles well. Once again, not a guy who's going to get backed against the cage like all 5 of Costa's opponents have. Really struggled to see how Costa wins this fight if it's extended. Just me.
Yeah, fair. I mean, I can't dispute most of the knocks on Costa you mentioned there. I haven't bet it, but I sort of think the value's on Costa here myself. Again, I'm looking for like plus 186 to plus 200. I think it'll probably get to that range come like Saturday, maybe if closer to fight time. I'm not really sure. But basically my thinking is like, if you look at, like, I think at the world of Adesanya, I think he's probably the best technical striker in the sport right now who's active anyway. But where we have seen him have some, I don't want to say bad issues, because obviously he won the Kelvin fight pretty cleanly. But when he did eat some shots, especially to like the body when Kelvin would go forward and back him up. The problem is Kelvin's not really a pressure fighter, and he hung out at distance most of the time. Conversely, here you have Costa, who's going to go forward like a bull and is going to have that insane pressure and keep it on him. And I do think a lot of those body opportunities are going to be there. Now, to your point, we've seen, the Hall fight. We've seen Costa get hit a lot. I don't think his defense is anything special at all. But also, that's not really Adesanya's thing, is jab and circle. Like, it's really more like sidestep counter. And like one of the reasons I kind of think Costa's going to have a lot of opportunities early is Adesanya actually, for as much talk about him like striking going backwards, it's really more he does an amazing job circling out and resetting, but he exchanges with just about everybody he fights. Like, he relies on head movement, speed, and reads to kind of like defend a lot of the shots that are there. And so like I think early in this fight, there's going to be a lot of exchanges in close range. Now, I don't think he's going to get Adesanya to the fence, but I do think you will see big pocket exchanges between the two of them. Now, can he wear them? Maybe. He might be able to. But, like, again, we don't really know that much about his durability to date, though. And, like, yeah, so that's kind of my thinking. We haven't really seen him fight a real pressure fighter yet. The openings are there to the body, and there's going to be openings in the pocket for Costa here. Or maybe not openings in the pocket. I shouldn't say that, because his defense in the pocket is pretty solid. But there will be exchanges there where he can land the bomb. Now, does that warrant a bet on Costa? I don't know, but I keep thinking to myself, like, I really do think Costa's going to have success early and win the first round, maybe 2 rounds. Like, just based on aggression going forward and throwing an absolutely absurd number of punches. Like, just one thing that stood out, Costa landed 118 significant strikes against Romero, and Izzy's never landed more than 120 in a fight. That's not to say I expect him to outvolume him, but it will get to be fought at a pace that, we've never really seen Israel fight at before. But I'm sort of thinking, if it gets up to the range where I think I'd want to bet it, I could play Costa, and then, if it kind of plays out early, like I think I could, like it will, I can probably get out of that bet at like near evens or maybe even plus money on Adesanya and kind of just have a free cash there. But yeah, I do think Costa is very dangerous. I think a lot of what you said in terms of him not beating anybody is definitely accurate. And this is definitely his stiffest test ever. But I don't know, man. I can't shake this feeling that, he is going to at some point, that the head movement that Adesanya relies on in the pocket to defend strikes is going to catch up with him, and he's going to get caught. And against a guy who's going to throw in the insane volume that Costa does, like, it just seems like this is the kind of perfect spot for it. I also wonder, I haven't looked what the 4-5 decision on Adesanya is, because I really don't think Izzy's putting him out there. And I've thought about maybe betting the over as well, because I kind of think a bet on Israel, like a bet on the over, is almost like a bet on Israel, because I'd be a little surprised if he puts him out early. But yeah, I mean, my lean's Costa here. I kind of see this as like Israel, like 55%. I think there's enough concerns and enough power coming back at him that, Costa has. Can he win a decision? C thinks he can. I wish C was on here to do it, because he had his whole rant planned out. But I don't know, because it's like, if Costa seems super durable, and if he wins the first 2 rounds, right, you never know what could happen in a late round, especially if it maybe turns into a staring contest like Romero Adesanya did. So I don't know. I respect the play on Izzy. I kind of personally think there's value on Costa. But yeah, that's what I got. Luke, do you have any Lambos this week? Because I do not. And our Mr. Lambo is the Sub Whisperer. Is it in here?
No, I don't. But I want to make a quick counter argument, at least in terms of how much Costa landed on Romero. I think it's also important to note how much Romero landed on Costa. He landed over 100 significant strikes on Costa in 15 minutes. He has never put that amount of volume or any of that amount of pressure on any guy in his UFC career. Why? Because Costa was tired and stationary. So I think that's a very, very interesting consideration here. Not that Yoel Romero's some bum or anything like that. I'm just saying, based on stylistics, a guy who's largely a counter fighter, a guy who's largely a burst-based fighter, landed that amount of strikes on this guy over the course of 15 minutes, when now we're also talking about a 25-minute fight against a guy who, in my opinion, is a lot more technical. Adesanya is not some super high volume guy, but he picks his spots, he sets traps, he does everything well. Ultimately, there's just nothing that tells me that if Costa does not knock him out early, that Adesanya doesn't just pick him apart to pieces.
Yeah, you're probably right, to be honest. I guess the one question. Oh, we have C here to do it.
Oh, boy.
Adesanya Costa. Hit us with it.
Yeah, I like Costa. I've voiced my opinion on this. I've put some things out. I do think Costa, just in general, bad if there's one matchup that you want, versus Izzy, it's someone who's going to pressure his balls off like Costa. I think there are some cardio questions that people have, but I actually tend to think that the cardio dump after 7 minutes is pretty overrated. I know people point at the Romero fight, but I think people have like a misconception sometimes about cardio dumping and what it's like in terms of absorbing so many strikes. Like Gaethje's a good example. It's not that he has bad cardio, but it's that he absorbed 200 strikes versus Poirier. So yeah, no shit. He dumped, but I can't imagine a scenario where Izzy lands 200 strikes in 15 minutes versus Costa. And, on top of that, Romero hits pretty hard. Good pocket boxing from Romero. So I think the Romero fight is more of, he landed 125 strikes or whatever it is. And Romero landed 135. I think it's more of a accumulation of damage than just having bad cardio. There's a lot of good threads, I guess, in terms of, the Izzy Costa. And there's two just different, opinions is Izzy going to be able to work his jab and break, the forward momentum of Costa, or is Costa just going to be able to tee off against the cage? They're both, it's just an interesting game plan of how they're both going to approach this. Even off his back foot, I know John was talking about this. I don't know if you talked about it on the pod or what, but he messaged me about it. I don't necessarily think Izzy is like some type of, like going backwards. I don't think his game's really that. Sidestep counter, sure. But moving backwards, I don't know. I just tend to like what Costa brings to the table in terms of working the body. And I don't necessarily think that I just don't know how durable Izzy is. I know people think, he's only been knocked out once, sure, by a killer, but, it's going to be different. The pressure that Costa is going to bring is going to be something that Izzy really hasn't seen. So I like Costa. I don't really think he's limited to, first round knockout, second round knockout. Honestly, if it goes to the decision, I actually tend to somewhat favor Costa a tad just on optics. He's going to land more volume and probably going to land the shots that you think are more powerful or look more powerful. So I like Costa.
Real quick, C. So how should, in your eyes, how should Costa approach this fight? Should he go traditional Paulo Costa, where he comes out super, super strong, or should he come out conservative?
I think even if he comes out super strong, I don't think it's going to be, necessarily like the Romero fight, where Romero basically gives you the fight that you want. And what I mean by that is Romero's okay just accepting a fight against the cage and just swinging. Same with the Izzy fight. He gives you the type of fight that you want, whereas Izzy's probably not going to make it as easy as just Costa coming forward with this pressure. So I just don't think in general him swinging, that type of output is really what's going to happen the first round. I just think in general he's going to probably just conserve more energy just by the nature of the styles of both of them. So, to answer your question, I think he's going to do what he always does, but I just don't think you're going to see like this crazy output just because Izzy's just not going to give it to him. Izzy's not going to just accept getting backed up against the cage. He's going to make Costa work.
Yeah, I don't disagree. It's going to be a fun fight. So we got some different takes in here. C, do you have any Lambos, submission parlays? What do you got?
Yeah, I took Espino round 1, Matthews round 1, Ibragimov round 1, and Tuck round 1. That pays like
What's the last one?
Takuga.
Yeah.
Takuga. Okay.
Takuga round 1 knockout. I think it's like plus 125,000.
was about to say, throw some zeros on that, bro.
That's the only one I got for this week.
Go put a couple Benjamins on that and buy yourself a new house or pay your mortgage off.
Yeah. Good
Those
luck.
C Bentleys, bro. Those C Bentleys.
And then this last thing, Lags actually sent me his plays. He's got 3 units on a parlay with Reyes and Makachev for the next pay-per-view. He's got 2 units. Costa Izzy doesn't start round 4, minus 144. And then he's got 1 unit on the Reyes Jan over 2.5, minus 130. So, yeah, thanks for coming out, everybody. It's been a fun show. Next week's going to be a fun one. Well, not as fun as this one, but I think it's a better card for betting, personally. So, yeah, as usual, I'm your host, John Stargarian, MMA. You can find me on Twitter at MMA Fox, Luke at SW_betting, and, well, he's gone, C, but at C Hansen 10. Thanks for coming out, guys. See you next week.